So, Las Animacha, our nicknames more, have always been a huge part of our society, and here to tell us why we have such names, we have our resident folklorist, Shane Lahan. Shane, a very interesting topic, but you have to be careful.
Well, seriously.
Well, listen, nicknames are going back a long time. You know, people were never, we had our official names, okay? The cognomen, as it's called, but then you had the agnomia, which is the official anthropological term now for the nickname, we'll say. So the study of this goes right around the world, and Ireland is no different. And we, you know, there were so many people with the same sort of names. You were saying it earlier, we had to differentiate
Well,
them.
especially in small communities.
Small communities.
There was no air codes at that time.
No. So, like, first of all, you would have the family name, we'll say, you know, that was there, but you would, you know, Johnny Jimmy Mora or something like that, you know. But then there was the location, you know, Kitty the Bridge or Kitty the Valley or Johnny Main Street or whatever it was, you know. People were, you know, you had to distinguish where they were from. Yeah. And then people as well had their different occupations, you know, the different things that they had. And that gave people, you know, there was like, you know, the chimney sweep or something. There was a chimney sweep here in Cork. He was always covered in all sorts of soot and so on. He was called Snowball then, you see, because, you know, because people there would always be little play. And what's great about the nickname in a way is that there was a little bit of humour in there, a little bit of a jibe. It wasn't always a negative thing. It was a kind of a
funny thing, really, a jokey thing.
Like there were Murphys now. There was a family of Murphys. Like there was the Murphy Blackbirds. They were famous now for singing. They were great. So like, you know, you'd have Johnny Blackbird.
So it's beautiful in that way.
You had the Murphy Monies. They were the people who lived near the bog. There were
Vaughan.
The Murphy Rabbits. They were known because they bought a farm of land from killing rabbits and selling them and so on. You know, so they were always known as like Johnny Rabbit or Jim Rabbit or whatever. You know, those kind of names. You know, Johnny the Pump. They were people with the petrol station, you know. So, like, you all of those sort of things come in, you know. And what was interesting is that my beautiful first cousin, Maureen Larry, she married into a family of the O'Sullivans down in Portmagee, right? And Maureen drives the taxi below there, okay? And she worked out with a lady called Lucy O'Sullivan, worked out there are over 125 O'Sullivans in between Portmagee, Carsevine, Valentia, and we'll say Waterville. Yeah. And because Maureen is driving the taxi, she needs to know, like, which O'Sullivans she's going to, like. And she sent me on, I just pick out, of the 125, there's the Dinny Jackeens, the Grannies, the Inchabuis, the Lisses, the Mills, the Mickeys, the Panaslippers, the Shea Machines, the Panaslippers, whatever they are, I don't know. The Trashers, Maureen is married into the Trashers, the Trixies, you know, the Yanks, all of those different sort of ones, you know. So Lucy's fantastic. She did a lot of raising funds for Jigsaw and young people's mental health and so on. But she gave me that lovely list of over 130. That's repeated all throughout the country.
It is, of course.
There are people, like, you know, trying to distinguish. But I love as well the nicknames for, you know, physical characteristics. You know, I remember growing up, there was a very large lady altogether. She was known as Tiny. You know, that was kind of the way that people spoke about it. Or people who were tall, you know.
My great-grandfather was Jack the Giant.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
My grandmother, she was Nell the Giant, and there's the call
because she was under him. You know, that kind of way.
He's a very tall man.
That's another thing I often notice is that you would assume the name of almost the paternal side of the family, or if you married into somebody.
You did all of that, but just go back because I'm interested in the Giant one. Okay, there was like my good friend Confather. You know, he's Confather. There could be only one Confather, but Con must be 6'3", 6'4". There was another guy I used to know. He was literally called 6'4" because that was his time, you know, and here's come 6'4", you know, and you know, but Long John or anything. There was a giant in Kinsale, Maura. He was Patrick Cotter, Patrick O'Brien. He was an amazing man. He was 8 foot tall. What? He suffered from gigantism, you know, one of those. But he was in Kinsale. He was known affectionately as Lanky Pa, right? He was nobody was just like he might have been on the stage going around the world, you know, as Patrick O'Brien, the Giant, but he was colloquially called Lanky Pa, you know. There's so many other ones. That's it. Yeah, he was a huge man, and great stories about him, and sadness as well, because, you know, he was a part of the.
If he was Lanky Pa, who was the other fellow?
Tiny miniature TMT.
There was another one for women who were very tall. I remember there was a woman who was very tall. She had a very thick pair of glasses. She was known as the Lighthouse. You know, and there was other ones like that. There was a cruel one in a way, the one which was called Hand Me Down the Moon, you know, because if a woman was very tall, she was tall enough to hand down the moon. But there was another aspect to that was that she might have been very difficult to satisfy. Like she needed everything.
Oh,
she even needed the moon as well. So
the stars
there was a
and all
little
that,
bit of a jibe into those little ones, you know.
Yeah.
But people with different coloured hair. Even we were talking about rugby now. Ginger McLaughlin, like he was known as Ginger, the rugby player, you know. Or out by me now, the Callahans, they'd be called the Fox Callahans because they had red hair. You had Dan Bui because of the skin colour. So
is that why? Because he was dark.
Yeah, they were sallow. Like, say, if you go back, say, the Spanish Armada came into our area back in a couple of 100 years ago, and a lot of them stayed and they married in. So a lot of the west of Ireland as well. You get in Clare, always went there.
And I know
you'd have a lot of them with darker skin. So that's that came from.
But I remember my mother saying as well that years ago, you know, now we all are constantly putting on fake tans and the whole lot to be dark. But back in the day, you know, growing up, Mom said that it was a terrible thing if you were dark.
Yeah.
And nobody wanted to be dark. So people used to be called Bornach, which is, what's born? Limpid, which is brown. So really, if somebody kind of bashed you and christened you like that, you were called you Bornach, it was because you were dark skinned and they hated it.
There was another one that reminded me of. There was a woman who was very holy. She was in church, you know, the woman who kind of says the priest's part of the mass rather than the, and she was known as the chalky god. Because she was pale and she was very religious, you know, like the statues that you get. And another one I heard about the woman who was always looking out the window, peeping out, she was known as the Child of Prague.
They were very poetic, really. When you think about it.
And they're cutting, but they're brilliant, and they stick because they're memorable, you know.
Do you think we've lost a bit of that now? Because society, as though I said, look, you know, we have air codes, and you know, we've moved a lot. You know, of course, the island nation, we were very insular in one way years ago, and you know, a lot of the same family names in place, so we had to have Las Amracha.
There was a purpose for it.
There's a purpose.
There was, It's actually a very good point. I'd say they're dying out, but they're still very. People would be remembered for all sorts of things.
In family names, maybe.
Yeah, I remember there was a fella I heard of there recently as well, and he was known as Sullish. And the school teacher, when they were putting on the Buntus kind of on the projector, he used to say, Sullis! And all of a sudden your man would stand up and turn off the light. So ever since then he was known as Sullis. So things kind of used to stick on people as well, you know.
Yeah.
One of the ones I heard here, Shane, was at a hurling match here in Cork, right? They were shouting at this fellow, well done Chile. And some fellow asked the fellow, said, why do they call him Chile? Well, his father's Con Carney. I thought it was the funniest thing I've ever heard.
That's actually really
brilliant.
good.
Brilliant.
So that's really modern kind of thing.
Modern, yeah.
And you know, you got all of those ones. Thinking of the matches, my father was a great man for collecting them. My father Ty, and I was going through his notes the other night, just thinking about them. And there was a guy called Puck Out. And I was sort of going what Puck Out was, and I looked out. He was famous for letting goals in. and we'd see to see him, they'd say, here's Puck Out, you know, because that's all he used to do.
That's all he gave the whole game to.
And he used to, there'd be fellas with ravenous appetites, you know, like tear him and eat him and murder the loaf. There was a fella like who used to literally come in and he'd murder the loaf, you know. But he had other ones here, the rancher, slobby, rams the kettle, mouthful of gobs. I don't know what the meaning of those are. They're lost, as you say, they belong to a time. But he had three funny ones. I think there's a bit of innuendo in them. There was a Choke the Duck, I'm not sure what that was, Babes the Best, and the last one was, and I love this one, Ducky in the Wardrobe, you know. Now, so like you can see, here's a Ducky in the Wardrobe coming along. I'm not sure what it meant, but there was certainly something strange about this person coming along, you know.
Yeah, but it's great when it kind of even continues these days, because there's a friend of mine, he was in school with us, and his father was a guard, and he was called Macafeeler. You know,
Peters, of course, they go,
Peeler, like this is only a couple of years ago.
Really?
And that Peeler goes back to the 1800s.
It does, of course it does.
Macafeeler.
But one of the great ones I remember with my dad, I remember that there was a man in Cork here called Donny the Flick, and he was known as Donny the Flick, and his name was Donal Murphy, but Donny the Flick. And why he was called Donny the Flick was that as children, what would happen is, look, there's a lovely image of him. He'd come along, children, he'd give children sweets, and my father would give him the money then, and with the money he'd flick it up in the air and flick it into his top pocket. But what happened with Donny was this: when decimalisation came in, the weight of the money changed, and for a period of time he was missing the top pocket. So eventually he had to do a bit of practice, and of course he got to do that.
Science went against him for a small while.
Listen, there were other names saying sometimes you were picked out for one thing in your life, one small incidental thing that, as you were saying earlier, you were passing by something. There was a girl she was called Tapioca because she went into a shop looking for the tapioca. She didn't know what it was. And forever since then, she was known as that, you know. And there was one of my students, he was known as Westlife. Why was he known as Westlife? Because one day he went out a Saturday night, he was wearing a polo neck, and his friends thought he was a bit up himself with the polo neck on. So from there on in, and he's been known as Westlife ever since.
So it's still happening, but in a different, so it's almost the modern take kind of. You're quick like that. Doi is like that. Doi would kind of put a name on you, as they say in the country, in about 2 seconds.
The thing about it, Shane, what lots of people don't know in this building, and lots of people who work with us, Maura and I would have a nickname for most of them. But it's not for any other reason that when we're talking about them, they don't know we're talking about them.
Well, we also are Mike the whole time, so we have to be like spies like us.
We speak in code, and the code is oft times in Irish as well, just to make sure. So it's really secretive.
It is true, but I wonder would that kind of happen sometimes with people that they just kind of almost christen them, that they, you'd be talking about somebody you wouldn't want to say who it was, and all of a sudden it would stick.
It would, of course, yeah. And that's what happened. Do you know the one I was thinking of as well? We were mentioning about the Yanks, any fellow who went away for the Yank and everything. But one of the best ones I heard was there was a fellow, he went off to Australia, maybe to, but it didn't work out for him, and he came back fairly quickly, and he was known as Boomerang.
That's very good.
So I never, because that characterised what he was doing and so on.
But I hope we don't lose the shame.
No, and I love the irony. I was talking to my pal Kieran O'Galvan, and he's down in the ring, and he was talking about Nicholas Tobin, the great tradition singer, absolutely brilliant. But Nicholas was known as China Doll, or China, because he used to sing Slim Whitman's song China Doll, and even a bastion of Gaelic tradition. There was a kind of a sense of here's China Doll coming in, or talking about that nation.
Shane, thanks so much. Great to have you with us.
Fantastic stuff.
Giving us a laugh.
Oh my God. Phil Coulter is coming up in a few minutes more. We're really looking forward to that.
Certainly is.
Phil and Kjol.
Phil and Kjol, the legendary singer, of course, and songwriter. He's back on the road, actually. This is first